Would you be willing to drill a hole into your skull to gain a higher power, no matter what those gifts might be? Today we're diving into a story that dares to ask that question, and into a real, disturbing practice that's been around for thousands of years and still exists today. The story begins by introducing Susumu Nakoshi, our protagonist, curled up in his car in the fetus position. This is the beginning panel, and our initial glimpse of him, making it quite the powerful intro and preparing us for what's ahead. Author Hideo Yamamoto manages to tell us everything about Nakoshi in just a few panels, and even fewer words. Susumu Nakoshi is a deeply flawed man, someone trapped between two worlds. He puts on a mask in front of others, pretending to be normal, but inside, he's hollowed out, detached, watching people go about their lives with quiet disgust. To him, humans are more machine than the machines themselves. He lives on the edge of two worlds. He hides in the shadow of wealth, right on the side of the world he's not yet ready for. Soon we get introduced to the character that will bring the call to adventure for our protagonist, if we follow the normal hero's journey, that is. A medical student in search of a test subject for a strange experiment. Nakoshi needs some cash, and although he was reluctant at first, he ultimately comes around and accepts to be the test subject. 700,000 yen will do that. After making their way to dodgy office, the operation can begin. I forgot to mention what the operation is. Nakoshi is about to have a hole drilled into his skull on the premises that he will awaken a higher power. Right now you must think, is the author thinking? But here's the thing, this isn't pure fiction. It's based on a real, ancient and extremely dangerous practice, one that's existed for thousands of years. Trepanation is an actual practice. It's been around for thousands of years. Across ancient civilizations, people deliberately drilled holes into their skull, believing it could heal, release evil spirits, or expand consciousness. Archaeologists have found skulls from over 7,000 years ago, with these clean circular openings and signs of bone healing, meaning many survived. For some, it was medicine, for others, just a ritual. Now fast forward to the modern era, and one name stands out: Amanda Feilding. In the late 1960s, Feilding met a Dutch scientist named Bart Hughes, who believed that as the skull bones fuse with age, they limit blood flow to the brain and human consciousness. Feilding took that theory to the extreme. In 1970, she filmed herself drilling a hole in her own forehead with a dentist drill. The short film, Heartbeat in the Brain, shows her calmly performing self-trepanation while her pet pigeon flutters nearby, a haunting image that became infamous in underground art circles. Feilding claimed she felt lighter, more awake, more connected. Mainstream medicine called it a delusion, but she didn't stop there. Decades later, she continued her research into altered consciousness through her Beckley Foundation, focusing on psychedelics and neuroscience. But what does any of this have to do with Homunculus? In Yamamoto's manga, Trepanation is the catalyst. Susumu Nakoshi, a man who has lost all sense of self, agrees to have a hole drilled into his skull by a young medical student. What follows is both supernatural and psychological. Nakoshi begins to see the homunculi, distorted manifestations of people's inner selves. Yamamoto takes Feilding's real-world obsession with opening the mind and transforms it into something terrifying. Instead of enlightenment, Nakoshi finds only despair. The hole in his head doesn't free him, it exposes him. Both Feilding and Homunculus ask the same question: what happens when you remove the last barrier between your mind and the world? Do you reach higher consciousness or lose yourself completely? And that's what makes trepanation such a haunting symbol. It's not just about drilling a hole, it's about obsession. About the human need to see beyond what we're meant to. Whether it's a 7,000-year-old shaman, a 1970s artist, or a fictional man sitting in a car outside a park, the drive is the same: to open the mind, no matter the cost. After Nakoshi gets the surgery, it feels normal. No enlightenment, no new sense of awareness, no divine revelation, just an empty man sitting in his car, parked between a luxury hotel and a public park. That spot, physically and symbolically, defines him, caught between two worlds, belonging to neither. Nakoshi doesn't believe the procedure will do anything. He doesn't believe in higher consciousness. He only needs the money that the medical student promised him. 10 days of observation, that's it. But what starts as a transaction quickly becomes something far more disturbing. At first, the changes are subtle. The world tilts slightly. Depth feels off. People's faces seem to shimmer at the edges. Then, without warning, his perception breaks. He looks at a man on the street and he sees a monster. Flesh twisting, form collapsing. It's not a hallucination. It's a reflection. A grotesque manifestation of something hidden inside that person. Nakoshi doesn't understand it, but he's drawn to it. Terrified but unable to look away, soon he sees these distortions everywhere, the homunculi. They appear as a physical representation of a person's inner trauma, guilt, and desire. One woman appears with half her head buried in sand, trying to ignore the world. A man looks like a cracked doll. Another is hollowed out entirely, a shell walking around pretending to be whole. Nakoshi's gift, or curse, isolates him. Every face he looks at tells him more than he wants to know. The human world becomes unbearable, because he can now see its true form. Every encounter becomes a mirror. When he helps people by confronting their inner selves, he's really dissecting his own soul. The line between observer and subject disappears. Nakoshi resists, terrified of what he might find, but curiosity wins. He digs deeper, literally and psychologically. The middle chapters are some of Yamamoto's most disturbing. Nakoshi starts performing crude experiments, interacting with the homunculi as if they're real. He becomes obsessed with a woman whose inner form fascinates him, leading to acts that blur the line between compassion and violation. The manga doesn't flinch, it shows the ugliness of empathy twisted by obsession. Throughout, Trepanation serves as both a scientific procedure and a spiritual wound. The hole in Nakoshi's skull becomes a doorway, but it's one he cannot close. He's no longer sure if what he sees is truth or madness. The final chapters are quiet, almost meditative. Nakoshi, once filled with disgust for humanity, wanders aimlessly. He no longer feels the homunculi, he accepts them. Maybe because he finally understands them. Or maybe because he no longer knows the difference between them and a real person. The manga ends ambiguously. Some interpret the final as Nakoshi's death, others as transcendence. Yamamoto never explains. That's the point. Enlightenment and insanity becomes the same thing. When you see everything, all the fear, guilt, and loneliness that makes us human, how can you stay sane? Homunculus begins with a man sleeping in his car, isolated from the world. It ends with him stripped of every illusion, utterly alone, staring into the abyss of consciousness. What started as an experiment becomes a spiritual descent. The journey isn't about acquiring power, it's about losing the filters that protect you from reality. That's what makes Homunculus terrifying. The horror doesn't come from monsters or gore, but from recognition. Because somewhere in those distorted faces, we see pieces of ourselves. And maybe that's what Yamamoto wanted us to feel. That unsettling thought that if we ever truly open our minds, we might not like what we see. Homunculus might have been published in the early 2000s, but its ideas feel more relevant than ever. We live in an age of constant self-examination. Psychology, therapy, social media, self-improvement. Everything around us tells us to look inward, to understand ourselves better. But at what point does self-awareness turns into obsession? Nakoshi's story feels like a warning about this modern impulse. He literally opens his own head to see deeper into human nature, and in the process loses his sense of self. It mirrors how we sometimes pick ourselves apart layer by layer until nothing feels real anymore. The story asks, whether knowledge itself can ever make us whole, or if, like Nakoshi, the more we learn, the less human we become. In the end, Homunculus is not just a horror story or a psychological fiction. It is a mirror. It reflects the fear of being seen for who we really are, and the deeper fear of realizing that we might not know ourselves at all. It is about identity, faith, trauma, and the loneliness that comes from seeing the world too clearly. Nakoshi's descent is not just madness, it is a form of awakening. But awakening in Homunculus is not enlightenment, it's exposure. It's standing face to face with your own reflection and realizing it no longer looks human. Hideo Yamamoto does not offer answers. He simply shows us what it means to open the mind and ask whether the human soul can survive that kind of light. That's why Homunculus remains powerful today. It confronts the question we avoid, the side of ourselves we bury, and the thin line between knowledge and insanity. Would you open your own skull for truth, or would you rather live in the comfort of illusion? Because once you see what's inside, you cannot unsee it.